Hey guys, it's Caitlin. So I wanted to share a book that I just finished reading that I enjoyed a lot, but it ties into a scripture in Luke on the Sermon of the Mount about loving your enemies. So this specific passage comes from Luke chapter 6, verses 32 through 36. Jesus says, "If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because He is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful." This is a very tough thing. This is one of the hardest things that anybody will have to do in their life, to love their enemies, right? We cannot do it on our own, though. We need God's help. A great real-life example is from the book Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand. This is a World War II story about Louis Zamperini, who was an Olympic runner, and he got drafted into World War II. He got drafted into the Air Force specifically. He endured some of the most terrible things anybody could imagine, anybody could even come up with. He endured crazy things. So when he was in a Japanese POW camp, he was beaten every single day. He was made to do humiliating things, dehumanizing things. And there was one commander soldier who just basically spent his entire time in the camp beating Louis. Like he would always seek out Louis. And this guy was a psychopath and a sadist, and he just loved seeing people suffer, especially Louis, right? So Louis was not a Christian at this point in time. He did not become a Christian until way after the war. And before he became a Christian, he obviously felt this sense of anger and resentment towards this soldier because of what he had done. And he was so angry that he wanted to seek out and kill the soldier that did this to him after he was released from the POW camp. He had so much pent up into him. He became an alcoholic. He was verbally abusive to his wife, and they divorced, and he couldn't take care of himself. And then his wife got him to go to a Billy Graham event, and that is where he eventually gave his life to Christ. But after he gave his life to Christ, he had compassion for the soldiers that were beating him and dehumanizing him throughout the camp. He went back after the war, went to the jail that all the soldiers were held in, and literally forgave them face to face. And he said that he had compassion for them. After enduring some of the craziest, most terrible things that a human could endure, he ended up having compassion. Obviously, he wouldn't have been able to do this on his own. He basically didn't have compassion before he became a Christian, but after he gave his life to Christ, he was basically reborn, right? So all that anger and all those desires to want to kill the soldier went away. He had compassion. So that ties in with the love your enemies piece. Or after the war and after he became a Christian, he eventually loved his enemies. And that is something that's very, very difficult to do, and we can't do it on our own. But if you read this book, I highly, highly recommend it. I'd say it's a 5-star book. But when we also look at the crucifixion of Jesus, he was silent. Jesus didn't say anything as he was being led like a lamb to the slaughter. Throughout his crucifixion, until he was on the cross, he was silent. He wasn't yelling at all the people that were literally beating him and flogging him. He wasn't screaming and cursing them out. But I know that if I was enduring that, I would have that desire to yell at someone. But no, Jesus didn't. And that's what makes Jesus different. And that's what makes people become Christians and they give their life to Christ. That's what makes us stand out, because we know we can't do these things on our own, because that's our natural instinct, is to be mad at our enemies and not to love them. But when we have Christ, when we call on God, God can help us do these things. And so I would highly recommend reading this book. It's really hard to get through some parts because it's quite graphic. So I'd say, like, if you're under the age of 12, maybe don't read it unless you're a mature reader. But I would highly recommend this for Christians, because I didn't even know that at the end he became a Christian. I just knew that it was a World War II story, and I really like reading about historical events. But I was really surprised to see that he became a Christian at the end, and he actually showed what most Christians should do, and he showed it in the most extreme case, because he had gone through the most extremes and still had compassion. So I do hope you guys enjoyed. I highly recommend that book. Highly recommend that you check it out. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys later. God bless.